Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining me today. It's a really exciting CMA tutorial today because I'm actually joined by none other than Dr. Frank Sabatino, who is the Complementary Medical Association's Research and Science Director. So Frank, thank you so much for joining us. It's an
Hey,
absolute pleasure to have you with us again.
hello to everybody out there
So,
from across the pond in South Florida.
that's it. Yeah. I think our connection's okay. I don't know if it may be a little bit iffy my end because I've got looming thunderclouds. So I was just saying to Frank earlier that he cut out slightly. It might be my end. So if we get some strange bits and pieces going on, I think we're getting a thunderstorm at any minute now. So what I'm going to do is, without further ado, I'm going to get cracking with this amazing session. What I'll do is I will put Frank, I'll spotlight Frank as our speaker. And really what we're concentrating on today is, I suppose you could say, in fact, I'll just put us on speaker view. So what I'm going to say today, there we go. There we are. So what I was going to say is that what we're covering today is we're going to be asking Frank lots of questions. I want this to be an interactive session. If you feel like, joining in and asking questions, that's all for the good, all to the good. And what we're covering is really the nitty-gritty about practice growth and development. And obviously, Frank has been a practitioner for many, many years. And so over the years, he has seen pretty much every model of practice there is. So we're going to be picking his brains on that and what works and what doesn't. And as many of you will know, I did my master's research on my MSc research on so I'm just letting more people in, thriving to practice and practicing to thrive. What are those factors that we could tease out among practitioners to work out what makes some people really successful personally and professionally in practice, while others really struggle? So this is one of the reasons I wanted to get Frank on today, because as you know, he's been a practitioner for, as I say, a long time. And so he's got a lot of insight into the models that really work. So Frank, you're on my screen now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set you as a spotlight for everybody, if that's okay. And the other thing I just wanted to also say is that I also wanted to touch on research with you as well, because I know obviously that's such a topic that's so dear to your heart. And also wanted to just talk a little bit about why, as an eminently successful chiropractor, you essentially crossed the divide and went and took yourself off to Emory Medical School and did your PhD. But let's come on to that a little bit in a little bit. For those of you who don't know you, obviously I know you've done these videos with me, these tutorials before, but for those of you who don't know you, can you explain a little bit about you and your background and what they need to know about you, really?
Yeah, I grew up in New York City, and early on, I really wanted to be a physician. This is something I knew from very early on in my life, but I was really geared in terms of a typical model, a medical model. And as a child, I had a major health issue that centered around colon, kind of like ulcerative colitis of a sort. And it was really mismanaged through all the years of my childhood with some of the greatest specialists in New York City. And in those days, no one ever really thought that, for example, nutrition had anything to do with bowel function, which always intrigues me because there's still a lot of gastroenterologists that still feel the same. They have no sense that dietary patterns and how we eat and what we do that way can affect the body. So to make the story short, I had this problem all through my teenage years. And as I was getting ready to go to college, I met someone who had a medical library that was based on all of the teachers of natural hygiene and a lot of alternative health practitioners from the 19th into the 20th century. And whenever I would come to visit, he would basically attack me at every turn until I really started reading my way through his library. And for the first time, I got a sense that there was a relationship between lifestyle, what we're eating routinely, and how the body is affected by that. It wasn't something that happened in a bubble. And at that time, I started eating plant-based, and that was in my late teenage years. And for the first time, the colitis and the bowel issues became a thing of the past. So I found it very interesting that after about 15 years of medical mismanagement, it took an insurance salesman from the Bronx to be able to solve my problem of colitis. So as it turns out, then I realized I didn't want to go the traditional medical way. And I knew that going in the direction of chiropractic, I could be licensed in every state of the union and many countries of the world. And it would allow me to practice in a drugless way, utilizing the nutritional information or whatever else I wanted to bring into that. So then my path fashioned on this chiropractic journey, which led me into many of the hygienic doctors of the time that were doing fasting and so on. And I spent time in some of these institutions, observing how they work, what they did. And I decided that for me, while I was happy doing office practice work, I wanted to be involved in more residential care, and I wanted to be able to do more things that were kind of like retreats in a more cloistered setting where people would come and stay for an extended period of time. So doing that in the late 1970s, I became the health director of a place called the Shangri-La Natural Hygiene Institute, which had about 130 people a week. And back in the day, it was only based on your money, a couple of £100 a week. So it was affordable to everybody. And I was fasting 50 to 60 people a week. I was doing chiropractic care. We were doing plant-based nutrition. And the truth is, I've been a plant-based physician for almost 45 years now. And that's been a big part of my teaching and my work. But then I decided through all of that, that I wanted to also be able to gather research skills. And so that's what led me into the work of science and going on in that direction. But really, I was turned on from very early in terms of my own health issues related to healthier nutrition and lifestyle. And then I took the path to chiropractic because that was a drugless path.
That's wonderful, Frank. Thank you so much for explaining that. Now, one of the things I think that comes up for me, just listening to what you're saying there, I think a lot of practitioners, for our UK-based practitioners, they may not have come across the term hygienic or hygienic practitioners or physicians. Can you explain what that actually means? Because I didn't know when I first met you.
You know, we know that there are basic biological requirements of life. So we talk about food, we talk about fresh air, we talk about sunshine, very basic things. And the hygienic philosophy, which was put forth probably the best by Dr. Herbert Shelton, though other people wrote about it, going back into the 19th century, was that when we have a deviation from appropriating those basic biological requirements, disease or a compromised state of well-being will occur. And that when we have a state or a deviation from well-being, by appropriating these basic biological requirements of good food, proper rest, and so on, the body has an inborn ability and wisdom to heal. So by providing the basic biological requirements and basically getting out of the way, we allow the system to heal at its fullest potential. And that was kind of the foundation of natural hygiene. How do we appropriate those basic biological requirements? And how do we allow the body to heal with a minimum of interference? And based on that, the whole model of fasting was part of that care, because that was basically the intelligent art of doing nothing, but doing it intelligently, literally putting people to bed, putting them to rest, taking away everything, including food, and now allowing the body to harbor the energy that would be available by not eating, by not appropriating food, and allowing that energy to be available for healing. And so all of that was part of that natural hygiene world. And many of the doctors doing that were already trained in some other discipline. They were medical doctors or osteopaths or chiropractors or naturopaths or homeopathic physicians, whatever they were, they already had some training at a very high level. And now they were incorporating this kind of mindset in a residential setting. So people would come for extended periods and participate in that.
Thank you. It's a wonderful thing, because I mean, for me, this has always been my sort of dream goal, is to have a residential center, because I think I probably speak for all of us here, and you know, we do realize, don't we, that we can only do so much when we've got our patients or clients in front of us. And unfortunately, when they leave, they walk out the door, we've got no control over whether or not they're walking straight into McDonald's or wherever. And it's really very soul destroying at times. I don't know if you guys find that. And so I think it's wonderful, you know, the idea of running retreats. But the thing is though, Frank, what I wanted to find out from you is, for those practitioners who don't necessarily work in a retreat setting, I know that you've got lots and lots and lots of colleagues and people you've worked with over the years. So I'm just going to let somebody else in. What I wanted to find out was, as far as looking at models of success in practice, what have you observed over the years that, you know, if you could sort of conjure up a recipe for practice success? Obviously, you know, just thinking first of all about people who are doing the non-residential model, so where we have
let's talk about two sides of that coin, because I've done long-term practices, office practices, and I've done residential, and I've done both together. What I found, and I think this is important for any practitioner, you need to find that niche that really feels right to you. So for example, what I mean by that is, I've seen people in practices, office practices, be eminently successful, incredibly successful. And I've seen people not be successful in that model. And I've seen people in residential centers be eminently successful and others that fail. So it's not that one or the other will create some absolute model or outcome of success. I think it really becomes what is going to work best for your personal mindset. So for me, what I found was that when I was working in office practice, as you mentioned, I didn't have enough time and input where you would do something, you may create and help someone in a beneficial way, then they immediately go back to the same habits and conditions, and it became a little bit of a merry-go-round in the office practice, where we were hand-holding the same dysfunction, we were hand-holding some of the same problems with making change. And I said, you know what, and we all know that in even fields like addiction and so on, we know it can take people anywhere from 3 to 4 weeks to change a habit. I mean, to really integrate something new in the working model of their own nervous system. So I found that having a residential approach allowed me to have people for a longer period of time, where we could do education, where we can do treatment, where we could feed them, where we could do things that would, in a sense, lock those choices in a little bit more directly, so that they had a greater opportunity to be successful in their normal life. Look, the truth of the matter is, no matter whether you do a residential or an office visit, they're going back to their normal life. They're going back to their families. They're going back to the stress of their job. I mean, that's just the nature of our reality. But I found that by having a little longer period with these folks, where we can plant the seeds of education, let them know why we're recommending what we're doing, I found that for me, it was a much more rewarding way to work. There are other people that don't like working that way, and they do really well in the office model. So my first thing about success is, what is going to work best for you? What is the niche that you feel most comfortable with? I, through all these years, have found mine, so that I know that I function best in that combination of doing kind of office-like work, but in combination with the residential center. Not everybody can do that, but you can be eminently successful in practice. Just make sure that is where you thrive the best. So that's one piece. The other piece, fundamentally, and I've been through so many practice management courses and so on, and they all have techniques and all have many things that can help people be successful. I think the first one for the body workers and the practitioners, like we all are, is number one is service. It's not money. It's not, it's not about, how many people focusing my attention on how many people I can get in the door. To me, the first focus is, are you providing the highest quality service that you are capable of doing? Are you coming from a place of service? Many years ago, there used to be a movement in chiropractic called the GPC movement. This is going way back. And what it was something called God-patient chiropractic. So people would come in, they would adjust or work on somebody, And that person would look into their own heart, their own sense of their own, their own sense of personality, and decide what they would pay for that service. And these people literally had boxes on the wall. And one of my favorites was a guy, Bill Bahan, who had a place up in New England in the United States. And he had the box on the wall practice, the GPC movement. And his work was all about, truthfully, all about love. The man radiated that in his work. People used to come in busloads from all over the entire United States to his little clinic in New England. And there would be buses lined up for like a half a mile in front of his office with people coming from all over the country. And he did no advertising. He did nothing but had this mentality of providing service. Now, most of us are not going to do what Bill Bahan did, and I don't even know how successful it would be in different countries and different mentalities and different mindsets. But the truth is, coming from the place of service is really, to me, the a priori part of successful practice. Then letting people know, number one, that you're there. They have to know where you are and who you are. That's another major piece for being successful. And the piece is, again, providing what is it that you provide that is unique to this field of caring for people. So what is your uniqueness? What is your strength? So, your mindset of being comfortable where you are, providing the service first, and understanding that service is of ultimate significance in what you do. And then, coming from that place of providing the highest quality service, but with your unique approach. So I may have a unique approach in chiropractic that I apply a certain way. That becomes kind of who I am in practice. And I think having that uniqueness, not trying to be all things to all people, because it sometimes dilutes the power of your personal strength, the personal ability that you may have to do what you do. So those are simple things out of the blocks.
Yeah, thank you. One of the things I always talk about is that it's so important for us practitioners not to commoditize our services. What I mean by that is that, if you are a nutritionist and there are 4 or 5 other nutritionists in your environment, in your town or what have you, do not start to look at their prices, their model of what they're doing and so on, and think, gosh, that's what they're doing, so I need to do that as well. Because essentially you are then simply commoditizing nutrition or whatever discipline it is that you practice. So I love what you're saying about really drill down to what is your uniqueness. I always talk about it in terms of you being the expert in your own self, actually, and you bring that knowledge of everything that's brought you to this particular point in time. It brings you to where you are right now as a practitioner, and that's what you draw on, and that is what actually makes you and your offering completely and utterly unique. I mean, how does that sit with you, Frank?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to our good friend, old Al Einstein, with perspective and frame of reference, because the truth is, many people will have training that maybe you participated in. You had classmates that, I graduated with a class of 300 or 400 people, which were trained exactly the way that I was trained. So the bottom line is, people have similar training, but no one has your perspective. And this is very, very important. Your frame of reference, your perspective of how you integrate what you have learned and what you have been licensed to do is unique to you. And you need to never really forget that, because no matter what else anybody else is doing, they don't have that from your perspective. And many times your patients, your guests, your people, however you label them, are coming to you not only for that technique that you do, but because they resonate with you and your perspective. They resonate with you on a frequency level. This is very, very important on an energetic level, because when people walk into an office, we're as practitioners, I always liken it to, there was a guy, Itzhak Bentov, wrote a book many years ago called Stalking the Wild Pendulum. And what it was about is that if you have a room full of tuning forks and you vibrate one, everything else in that room begins to vibrate at that frequency. When someone walks into your space, you are establishing a frequency. Whatever that frequency is that you want to create in your space, in your healing environment. So that now these people come in with their own dissonance, their own deviation from a state of well-being. Maybe they have pain, maybe they have disease, maybe they have whatever's going on in their lives, but they're coming into your space. So you have this unique opportunity from your perspective to establish this vibration, this frequency that you want in your space, and they will begin to vibrate at that frequency. That's the beginning of the healing communication that goes on, in my opinion, in the work that we all do. How do we establish that frequency of care? Not only the technique, not only everything else around the practice, but how do we come from that place? Because I will guarantee you, when people begin to recognize that your healing environment for what it truly can be, they will come back. They will refer people. There will be word of mouth. There will be all of the things that really build practices for people. So to me, what Janie said is very real. That perspective, your uniqueness is something that is you, and no one else is that.
Thank you. Yeah, that makes so much sense. So what I want to do now is jump from that very kind of spiritual overview over to what happened when you, and why did you go from being a very successful chiropractor to then thinking, actually, what I really need is a doctorate?
What made me go into the doctoral direction? Is that what you're asking?
That's right. Uh-huh.
What I discovered is that as I was doing the care that I do, and then working in the residential settings where we were dealing with very advanced states of disease, I mean, really people that had been everywhere else and decided that nothing was working, and sometimes we were the last resort, whether it was fasting or nutritional care or whatever. But there were so many things going on in that work, physiologically, biologically, that I wanted more ability in myself to be able to question that and to examine that a little bit closer. So it led me to want to go on to gather research skills, really with the hope that I would be able to bring those back into the field that we all work in terms of complementary medicine and alternative ways of doing things, because not a lot of people were really bringing those kinds of skills to the kind of questions we want to ask and the kind of things we want to look at on a subtle energetic level or even on a subtle cellular level. And so it drove me then to go and pursue my work. And I was operating a fasting and nutritional and lifestyle clinic in South Florida. And then I decided that I was going to teach for a little bit. So I wanted to go teach at the Chiropractic College in Atlanta, Georgia. And that's also the site of the Emory University School of Medicine, which is kind of classified as the Harvard of the South, which I always love. Anyway, so I decided that I was going to try to pursue a PhD in whatever, neuroscience, physiology, whatever, something that would allow me the opportunity to gather some skills that I hoped I could bring back to the kind of work that we all do. So that's when I applied for Emory. Being a chiropractor, they thought I had 14 heads and 16 legs, and I was possessed by demons, because from that standpoint, this is a really high-end medical, preoccupied establishment. And here was this chiropractor coming in. And so when I applied, you'll appreciate this, they give you a little application form with a space of about that big to write why you want to do this. So of course, me being never really short of words, my application was about 10 pages of writing why I wanted to go into this. And it tied into models of subluxation. It tied into models of how chiropractic works on a neurophysiological level. It tied into brain. So when they received this thing, half of the faculty thought I was even more possessed by demons. And the other half said, maybe he's got a fresh view that would be beneficial for this faculty and for this institution. So they still weren't sold. And I had to spend 6 months in a lab demonstrating my desire, so to speak, to get into this program. And I went into one of the labs that one of the scientists who was a supporter of my application took me in. And then I got in and I spent the next 5 years at Emory Med School getting the Ph.D. in neuroscience and neuroendocrinology. And then I got an assistant professor job after that for 2 years on the University of Texas Health Science Center, where they did all of the landmark work in calorie restriction and aging. And I was on the aging research faculty, and I taught there for several years. So it took me a kind of on another path that then I circled back and brought back into, where we are now. So yeah, it was an interesting, arduous journey. It wasn't an easy journey.
Thanks, Frank. Yeah, it is very difficult, isn't it? I mean, obviously you were a trailblazer at that point. I think that the conventional medical folks and conventional science are really their perspective is very different now. And I certainly speak to any of the younger doctors these days, and they're very open to the idea of, lifestyle contributing to health and well-being. Whereas, in fact, I mean, I even remember when I was speaking at the House of Commons, for those of you overseas, it's our government. I was making a presentation to our government, and I remember an eminent what was he, a biochemist, biochemical professor, standing up and saying, there is no evidence that the food that you eat contributes to health and well-being in any way. And that was only in the 1990s. So it must have been, very similar. Your experience must have been very, very similar. And I'm sure that it was.
I like the line by Dr. Kim Williams, who was the head of cardiology at Rush Medical in Chicago, one of the most pristine and prestigious universities in the world. And he is the director of cardiology. He's the head cardiologist. And he said there's only two kinds of cardiologists in the world: vegan cardiologists or cardiologists that don't know the literature. And I love that line, because the data now is so strong on lifestyle impact on health and well-being that if you're out there as a practitioner, you must know that you have an arsenal of data behind you now for making the simplest, healthiest recommendations in terms of nutrition and lifestyle, whether it's physical activity or stress response management or, plant-based nutrition. The data is vast. You have such an arsenal of support now for doing what you do, and you can feel confident with that. And you can feel confident that there is that out there that you can lean on. And, we lean on it all the time. And there in the United States, we have a couple of foundations that are doing, advanced research in fasting care and things of that nature. So, the world is really shifting to embrace the fact that the old models, allopathic models of how things have always been done, have tremendous shortcomings and have really many problems associated with them. And that the newer work of understanding the impact, the information that healthy nutrition provides, or the more subtle energy activity that's involved with regulating health and disease, and how many practitioners are working with those subtle fields and that subtle approach to helping people get well. It's a remarkable, positive time in the evolution of all of that, because it can't be stopped and hindered anymore. There's such a waterfall, a cascade of information that's supporting what all of us do, that we just need to embrace it and be thankful and have a lot of gratitude for it.
You're absolutely right, Frank. And what I find so fascinating is that, as I said earlier, you've got doctors now who do understand the connection between lifestyle interventions and health and well-being, which is fantastic. That's great. But obviously, if you think back to the 90s, the early 2000s, even as far as sort of 2000, sort of 2011, 2012, 13, 14, 15, we were still getting massively attacked in the field of complementary medicine, not just obviously nutrition, but, you know, and nutrition has a plausible mechanism of action. But I'm actually thinking about the homeopaths, the chiropractors, and so on, where we are dealing with energetics. And so obviously a very soft target for the highly paid, should we say, professional skeptics, as we know, and it is a matter of public record that they are representatives of the pharmaceutical industry. No ifs, buts, and maybes, not conspiracy theory, it is fact, and you can look that up on the Charity Commission website. But what I want to say is what's very interesting, and what you touched on there, is the fact that the level of research in the field across all of the disciplines now is such that we have this very difficult edifice to attack because we have the data. Yes, we know in homeopathy now, without a shadow of a doubt, yes, it works. Of course, we still don't have a plausible mechanism of action, but then again, neither does aspirin, does it? So, you know, it's, you know, and people in glass houses really shouldn't be throwing stones. So I have seen, in my role as president of the CMA, I have seen a massive decrease in the attacks on complementary medicine. You still get the odd snide comment from a comedian or something like that, but there's nothing like the onslaught that we used to have. And so that's great because it means that we are free to not have to fight fires, but actually to be able to get on with the work of actually healing people, which is, you know, obviously what we're all here for. So I really appreciate what you were saying there. And I think it was very brave that you took the time out to, you know, jump ship and if essentially sort of almost go to the dark side, because that must mean, I think, very philosophically, a very difficult thing for you to do.
It was difficult also because, you know, just on a simple note, something very simple, you know, being plant-based as long as I have been and being so supportive of the rights of all species on this planet, including animals of all species, you know, doing animal research, which is what that research is, was at times incredibly difficult. And, you know, I had to really bite the bullet and, you know, I had to reckon with it in my own way on an emotional and even spiritual level. Truthfully, I'm being honest now about having to go through that. But what I liked about the aging research that I got involved in is that these are animals that live almost twice as long as normal animals. So my job there was basically to keep them alive longer. So that was really a nice transition for me in that phase of my postdoc studies, because that was the complete opposite of everything that came before. But yes, it's interesting. I think having more and more people now that are going those paths to gather certain skills that they can then bring back into doing other kinds of research. So for example, I'm in California, you know, Dr. Alan Goldhammer, who's my good friend, they have the True North Foundation, which is a fasting research facility. And that research facility is now tied into the Mayo Clinic. It's tied into major medical universities all over the United States. And I'm on kind of the governing board of that, and I'm one of the consults for there. And so he's got a staff of PhDs and different people that have gone in very orthodox ways of looking at science from the medical perspective that have now circled back into this world of looking at all of these alternative approaches. And so it's really a beautiful thing to see how we're gathering some of the best minds and some of the people that have really paid a lot of dues to now bring those skills into asking the kind of questions we want to ask, so that we can create a whole new model of helping people that's not based on killing them with medication. It's not based on having to rip organs out of their bodies, but teaching them how they can help themselves to get well while we provide the kind of care that we provide. And that's a beautiful, beautiful thing.
It really is empowering the patient rather than the old patriarchal model of medicine, which was
And empowering for all the practitioners. I mean, it's empowering for all of us. I mean, remarkably.
Yes, absolutely. One of the things I wanted to touch on today, and I think we've probably got a few people in the group who may be interested in discussing the research side of things. Now, if you can sit back a little bit or even lower your camera, Frank, and show everybody.
I'm just listening to you.
Yeah. I want you to demonstrate your fashion choices for today, please.
Well, you know, I don't want to say there was any coercion or pressure, but
Good man.
I not only that, I wear the merch because frankly, it's really beautiful. I love this. I mean,
That's all right. I'll pay you later.
we like beauty, you know that.
That's absolutely right.
No,
But
but these are great shirts, and I love this shirt. So
yeah, I know you do. But so the reason I asked you to do that is because I know a few people have just joined us slightly sort of further into our discussion. So Frank, as I said at the top of the show today, is the CMA's Research Science and Research Director. So one of the things we're very keen on at the Complementary Medical Association is making sure that everything that we talk about, everything that we put out, is evidence-based. It's massively important. And I think this is one of the reasons for this huge turnaround in the field of complementary medicine, as in not being attacked as much, because we are constantly pushing the research out. And so, you know, we're quite a difficult target to actually sort of approach, because, you know, we can actually go back to the literature and say, well, this is the evidence for what we're talking about. And actually, Frank is very much instrumental in supporting our research efforts and our research types of initiative, particularly when it comes to supporting practitioners who are interested in potentially doing research. So what I would like to do is invite you, if in the chat box, or if you want to unmute yourself, if you'd actually like to ask Frank a direct question, that would be great, or just pop something into the chat box. But Frank, can you, whilst people are thinking about that, and actually, you know, just, you know, while they may be writing or they may be thinking about phrasing a question, can you talk a little bit about why, you know, the research that's going on in your field at the moment, because obviously you just touched on the fact that you're involved in the fasting research through True North, but also maybe talk about a little bit about the way that practitioners can get involved in research if they haven't been to date. What would be the best way for them to start?
well, I think just as an intro into that, I want to just make one statement. You know, I don't usually attach myself to groups and organizations on a professional level much, because I've had a lot of people through the years with a lot of hidden agendas, and I try to separate myself. One of the things that attracted me to the CMA was exactly what you said, that it is an organization that is all about the evidence base for what we do, that you've had an unwavering focus of standing up for that and standing up for the practitioners and the people doing the kind of work that we do. And I have nothing but admiration, and it's been inspirational to me. So I'm very happy to be connected with the organization the way I am as a research director or consult. And I just want people to know that I haven't found really any organizations in the world like this one, truthfully. And I've been around many of them where they really have this unwavering commitment for literally almost 30 years. And frankly, from a time, as you mentioned, when it wasn't cool, meaning that you were being attacked and, you know, you had to come up in the face of a lot of nonsense to be able to keep your mindset and to keep your focus. So I really admire and respect that. I think the best starting point for people as practitioners is, number one, just to read the literature. I mean, I think you have to start and just read the information, because you know, it's funny, I know so many medical doctors who feel that they have the right to kind of pompously pontificate about many things in natural health that they truly know nothing about. And in many cases, don't even know their own literature. That's why Kim Williams said what he said. There's only vegan cardiologists or those that don't know the literature. Many times people get busy in practices and they don't have time. They don't take the time to really see what's current, what's up to date. So I believe the first step is in your own field, in your own interest. What interests you? What part of the healthcare continuum are you working in? What part of that is exciting to you? If you're a massage therapist, what's the data on body structure, body changes, energetics that are involved in healing changes in whatever situation? In the chiropractic field, we have a foundation for subluxation research that on a very deep level is evaluating studies on every imaginable kind of state of dysfunction and the relationship to chiropractic care and what that is what the outcome of that is, even in addiction work, et cetera. In the fasting care, we see major studies that have been done on fasting and hypertension. Now they're looking at fasting and lymphoma. And so they're creating research protocols that will look at these things a little closer. But the first step is becoming aware of reading a research paper, reading an article that's a little bit deeper and looking at the methods of how they did things. What is the question that they're asking? What are the results that they're sharing with you? What are the conclusions that they're drawing from those results? And it gives you a chance and some of the papers, of course, may be very obtuse, but there are many ones that are very accessible. And so you can look and see how they designed what they did. You can see, did this research really, in your mind, answer that question? And did it answer it in a way that you would like to answer it? Or was there something else about that that you would like to ask? And so it gets you into what I call a thinking mode, because unless you've really read scientific, when I first started my PhD program, what you start with is reading about 2,000 pages of scientific papers a week. That's how it started. And I remember just being, around the clock, reading papers and then going in to discuss them, because they know right out of the blocks, you're not going to be able to do research unless you really looked at people doing research, unless you read some of the things. And that's why I like in the newsletters that you put out, you always have interesting articles that have research components to them. And they're not difficult to understand. That's what makes it nice. They're very comprehensible, but it gets people into that mode. So I would say that that's the starting point. Looking at literature in the field, reading papers, reading and coming to grips with what is being done, what is being questioned, what is being challenged. And to me, that's a beginning.
Yeah, thank you. In fact, this leads me on to something that is an announcement. It's an early announcement because we are putting it up. I'm in the process of doing this. The CMA is partnering with an eminent immunologist called Dr. Peter Kay, a wonderful Australian man. And Peter has written a course on understanding scientific literature. So it's directed precisely at the needs of complementary medical practitioners. And he was incensed by, if you all remember, when The Lancet published that piece on fraud in science research and how so many biomedical papers are absolutely, the conclusion does not actually reflect at all what happened in the experiments themselves. And knowing full well in published literature that most people will read the abstract, then they'll jump straight to the conclusions. And there is such a high level of fraud, and the Lancet are taking action against it, and the British Medical Journal taking action against it. I'm sure many others are as well. So anyway, Peter is putting together this course for us to be able to give to you on how to read papers, how to understand them. So I think that's something that I think is very, very exciting. And so that's actually something that I want you to look out for, and you'll obviously get a notification when that goes live. The second thing, though, for those of you who are taking the first tentative steps into the field, the best thing you can do, as Frank has just said, is read, and go and get yourself onto PubMed, PubMed, if you don't know of it already. PubMed is the American, the NIH, the National Institute of Health Research in the USA. It's their database of the last, probably 40, 50 or more years of all published biomedical research. So all you need to do is go to PubMed, put your search term, whether it's homeopathy / insomnia or chiropractic / eczema, whatever your particular field of interest is, you put it in the search bar, click search, and up comes the literature. Get into it, start reading it, and start really getting very critical about it. And I appreciate you may not understand statistics. I appreciate there may be terms that you don't understand, but that's what we're here for. We're here to help. And Frank this is something that probably, Frank, we ought to talk about at some point as well, which is, what do all those, P numbers mean and things like that. I think we could maybe do a discussion about that another day. I'm not sure how you feel about that. So I don't want to just put you, just jump you into something, but yeah, I think that could be quite helpful.
Let me make a point too, because we're dealing with an audience of incredible practitioners that are doing many wonderful, wonderful things. And I really want to hammer home, because I've been in the medical world, the scientific world. You are the only people, and this is the truth, that are really helping people get well. You need to know that. You need to embrace that. You need to come from that place of strength. The medical profession is not about getting people well. It is about disease care and caretaking disease. If I go to, someone comes into a medical doctor with high blood pressure and they are treated medically, the person will ask that physician, how long will I be taking this medication, doc? And what's the answer? For life. And if you go in with a low thyroid, they're going to give you thyroid medication. How long do I take it, doc? For life. And they know there's no way that you are going to get well. So the truth of the matter is, we are doing the things and planting the seeds for people to resolve those problems, to reverse those problems, to heal those problems. So I urge you to come from that mindset of strength, no matter what roadblocks you hit, no matter how many people attack you, because you are at the forefront of truly helping people get well. And these are the professions that we are involved in that do that. The vaunted medical profession does not do that. And that's why you're seeing now many physicians, especially in the United States, going into the Plantrition Project, going into these fasting centers and retreat centers. Why? Because for the first time, as physicians, they actually see people get well. And when they do, it absolutely blows their minds. So I'm urging you to embrace what you do from a position of incredible strength and understand that you are at the forefront of truly helping people get well.
Thank you. That is so inspirational, Frank. Thank you so much. Now, we've got some questions, so we'll wrap up in a little bit, but if I can run the questions past you, Frank, that would be great. The first one is from Joanna. She says, hi, Frank and everyone. I have a couple of potential supervisors for my sound healing research. However, neither is keen to support the physiological evidence and are more interested in the concepts of resilience and subjective well-being. Is it possible to do the physiological side, e.g. galvanic skin response, hormonal levels, etc.? If I don't have a medical background, I don't know whether to insist on this or to concede that I'm not going to be able to do it. What are your thoughts?
Well, see, the problem you have with that is there are so many probably incredibly physiological things and biological things that are occurring in that care. The question that always becomes the problem in science is, how do you narrow down a question? How do you decide on what it is you're trying to ask? Because you have to create an hypothesis that basically is set up to decide whether what you do actually has an impact or whether it's occurring more by chance than anything else. Basically, that's all science ever does, is what I do, is there a confidence in what I do as having the effect that I'm saying that it has, versus the fact that nothing is happening or that it's occurring purely by chance. So the hard part in the research always is, how do you ask a simple question? The best research, the most profound Nobel Prizes have been giving for research that actually has addressed things in the simplest way possible. The more difficult questions are and research is, the likelihood is that you're not going to get an answer to a question. So in this case, you may take something as simple as, I don't know, let's suppose you had a randomly controlled trial of people with rheumatoid arthritis. Let's just take that for example. And then you had controls that did not. And now you incorporate this sound healing and you want to look at one or two inflammatory markers, just for the sake of argument, maybe CRP or IL-6 or something like that. So you can set up a study, but then you have to have a way to measure it. You have to have labs that will do it. You have to have people that, if you don't have the skill, people that will evaluate the data. So that's why many times people create a group or a kind of a small foundation where they bring people in with separate skills that can look at all of those pieces. It's hard to do that on your own, and it's hard to do it even financially on your own, to gather populations of people. That's why sometimes people will do a trial study where they may have just an outcome study of one or two people. I know, for example, when True North did their first lymphoma thing, they had one person with a lymphoma that they monitored over a period of time and saw changes. And that led to what then became a pilot study, which then leads to another, so that little dance goes on in science. But the question is, how do you set up something where you can look at something that's very, very simple and clear with an ability to randomize a group of people that have a certain problem that will manifest this thing so that you can evaluate with confidence whether your treatment or care was actually making an impact on that. And I'm not saying that that's easy to do, but it is doable. But you have to know a little bit about design. You have to know a little bit about research design. This is, again, where looking at a lot of studies or attracting people that are interested in your work that have those skills. So True North didn't have all the PhDs, but what they did is they had people that got fed up with what they were doing in science and wanted to really look at some interesting questions, and they became part of the foundation. So sometimes it's about sharing your work with people where you will excite someone with another set of skills that wants to come in and take your work a step further to look at those markers and things.
Terrific. That's fantastic. Actually, it does bear saying, doesn't it? Even with that just single person with lymphoma in that study, it was nevertheless actually published in the BMJ, wasn't it?
It was published because they had to reckon with, okay, this is something. Is it something? But
Yeah.
it's, for right now, it's something that we've never seen. So, that leads to, okay, maybe we need to get more people. So your sample size gets larger, which of course it has to be. And then we can look at this more effectively over time. But, science moves in that way, though, usually, because you have to have an initial observation that can lead to a set of trials that can lead to something a little bit bigger. That's the way it's usually done. And that's the way it becomes more irrefutable for your results, too. But that's the dance, and it can be done. It can be done in any field. It can be done in any work. You just have to be very, very clear on the question that you're trying to ask and the hypothesis you're trying to make. And if you are, and you have a simple way to test it, you're going to come up with information that people need to reckon with.
Indeed, thank you. We've got a question from Mo. I'll answer this as well because, and I'll be brief about it because I don't want to keep everybody too long. The question is, how, as practitioners, are we expected to refer our clients to doctors for them to check with or agree with any of our suggestions for their healing when they don't know what or how we do it, or even actively dislike or mistrust or criticize our practices as quackery? How do we get around this without leaving ourselves open for further criticism or ultimately being struck off from our practices? From practitioners, I think, or doctors who respond in fear. I think that's what you're getting at there, Mo.
I missed the very beginning of that. Could you say that again?
I'll repeat it again. I was just going to say, I will speak to this as well because I've got some thoughts on it. It's how, as practitioners, are we expected to refer our clients to doctors for them to check with or agree with any of our suggestions for their healing when they don't know what or how we do it, or even actively dislike or mistrust or criticize our practices as quackery? How do we get around this without leaving ourselves open for further criticism? So my response to that one, Mo, is that I would question why you are referring your client to a conventional medic. The question, I would refer, if I was in doubt about the person's health and if I suspected they may have something going on that needs to be referred to a doctor, I would simply say to the person, go and see your doctor. At that point, you don't need to work, or tell the person to say, I've been seeing a reflexologist, a homeopath, a nutritionist, or what have you. You're just simply telling them to go and get checked out by their doctor. Let's say you've got somebody that you suspect has type 1 diabetes, for example. Okay, not a lot that we as practitioners can do about that. That person needs insulin, so no ifs, buts, and maybes. So that's my first thing. The second thing, though, is if you actually actively want to work with a conventional medic, with your patient's permission, And in order to do, in order to manage the case better and to get a better outcome for the patient, then what I would say is you would write to the doctor. Now, again, with Dr. Peter Kay, he's actually creating some more information for us about how to work with, how to understand the science of what's actually going on, the pathology of what's going on in immunology cases and also in oncology cases, for example. And there are there's more of this information from other pathologies coming down the pipeline. So what I would say is wait for that, read that, but there's no harm whatsoever in writing a nice, polite letter to your client's doctor with their permission, obviously, to say, look, this is me, I'm introducing myself, this is what I do, these are my qualifications, this is my insurance. And quite honestly, if you've got a doctor who's reasonable, they're probably actually going to welcome your communication. In my experience, nowadays, there are very few doctors who dismiss what we do as simple quackery. If that is the case, then I would suggest to the patient, go and find a different doctor. Frank, have you got any input on that?
Well, my feeling about it is that usually if I'm referring someone for medical evaluation, it's because I want them to do some testing that will provide additional information to the case or to what they're working through. So basically speaking, in the United States, if you're working within the context of your license, what you're able to do, no one is typically going to challenge that. So, if I'm diagnosing cancer as a chiropractor, yeah, I'm going to probably have a problem. But if I'm doing my chiropractic care and I say, you know what, I think someone needs an MRI or a CAT scan because, I'm working on their back, there may be something with the kidney here that I need to know about before I go further. Many people have regular medics in addition to the alternative practitioners that they go see. So I just tell them, go to your general doc or whoever you see, let them look a little bit closer at this because I want to make sure that you're okay in this regard. And I haven't seen the attacks for that. Someone may not agree with my nutritional recommendation, and if they're a doc and they want to challenge it, they have a right to challenge it. They could say whatever they want. But the bottom line is I have a right to make the recommendation and I have a right to stand by what I say. And I think we just need to get a little stronger in who we are and what we do and understand that if you're sending someone for additional information, even if you're not working hand in hand, I don't have any docs that I work hand in hand with. But I have doctors that will refer to me, and there are doctors that I will refer to if I feel that I want additional information on this person because I think it's in their best interest. So I think anymore, those kind of communications are working out okay. I don't see them being a big problem. And again, for me, with the medical system, testing is not the problem. What you do with the information is the problem. So I tell people, look, I need to know more about how your kidney's working, because if you want to fast with me, I can't fast you if I see this kind of kidney change. I want to know that it's okay. So if I send them to their doc to get that evaluated more effectively, and then that information is brought back to me, that's fine. The bottom line is information is just information. How you use it is the next step. And I think sometimes guests or patients feel that if they go to their doctor and they get information, they have to follow the recommendations that the doctor makes. And I tell them, you don't have to follow anything. Right now, you just need the information. You have the right to make the decision how you want to treat that. If you want to take a step nutritionally to address that, that's one thing. If you want to take a medication, that's your choice. But the patient, the guest, has a choice of how they want to handle that. And if you're doing your work solidly from a solid frame of reference, from a solid base, I guarantee you they're going to come back to you for your care while they manage whatever they manage medically too. That's a non-issue for me.
That's terrific. Thank you so much. Mo says, thank you. That really clarifies things for me, which is great. Thank you for that's brilliant, Frank. Thanks. Joanna, so we'll have one last question and then we will wrap for today. So Joanna says, Joanna's the lady who asked us about the sound healing and the research that you were just speaking to just now. Joanna says, what's your view on the difference between doing a PhD versus conducting a research project?
Well, they're two different things.
Yeah.
Doing a PhD means that you're basically a glutton for punishment and you need to go on in your life and you're ready to take abuse to get to a very high level of understanding. Doing a research project doesn't need any of that. But I will guarantee you, though, to do an effective research project, you're probably going to need some people with that kind of background, only because they will allow you to not make mistakes that could set your research back months and years, because they're setting it up properly with the proper methods, setting it up, and people that get master's and PhD degrees learn that process and they learn how to, do those things more effectively. You can do the research with your care, you can do all of those parts, but having somebody with those skills will be beneficial. I wanted to gather the skills. Not everybody wants to go that direction. If Janie and I wanted to do a research project, I would bring my skills to the table. She would bring her skills to the table. We would do effective research. Does she need to have her own PhD? No, not really. But I think having someone that has that experience will help you immensely in getting to the heart of your question more effectively.
Absolutely. Also, there are quite good books that you can read on how to structure, how to choose a methodology, a research methodology, how to structure your research. So again, coming back to what Frank was saying earlier, it's very, very important to read as much as you possibly can. There will also be really good resources on places like YouTube as well, where, just get into YouTube, start going down that great big black hole and watching videos from people who talk about research, who talk about how to do your PhD, how to structure PhD questions and hypotheses. And so, the information is out there. You've just got to go and find it. But obviously, as I always say, that's what we're here for at the Complementary Medical Association. Obviously, as an organization, yes, we provide membership services. And yes, obviously, what we do is we promote you out there to the public in the medical profession. But we're also absolutely dedicated to make sure that we can help to further the field and support you in any way that we possibly can. So if there aren't any further questions, I just want to finally, just obviously thank you, Frank, for being so absolutely amazing as always. Is there anything that you wanted to say just in closing at all?
No, I basically said it. I really think I admire all of the people working in alternative medical fields, because you've had to overcome a lot of obstacles and issues that were brought up in this little meeting. Just be really solid in yourself and understand that you're doing things that nobody else is doing, and that you're helping people get well in a unique and powerful and beautiful way. And I just really want to honor and respect all of you for the work that you do. And I appreciate what you do, and keep doing it.
Thank you. Yeah, that's what I always say, is just keep on shining your beautiful light out into the world. And I cannot tell you how much we appreciate you. So thank you so much for being with us today, everybody. And I shall see you same time, same place next week. All right, lots of love. All the very best to you. Thank you, Frank. You're amazing.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.